Good morning, Faith Bible Church, Menifee. I just wanted to send out a quick video because I know this week and last week we're doing word studies. I know there's been some difficulty with this, some struggle with this. So I just wanted to talk real briefly why we do word studies and then show you guys one tool online that you can use that's really simple in order to help you guys with your word studies. So why do we do word studies? I think we have to realize and remember that the New Testament was written over 2,000 years ago. And so, since it's been written over 2,000 years ago, the meaning of words change over time. I mean, I think about just in my lifetime that the meaning of the word bad has changed. It started off as something to kind of just run away from, something that you want to avoid at all costs, something that is horrible, something that is horrific, something that could even be evil. And it kind of changed and transformed from something to be avoided to something to pursue. It's something cool and something edgy, something to be desirous. And so we see that the meaning of words change. And so I would say the second reason why we do word studies is because we come across words on a daily basis that we don't use in our everyday vocab. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't oftentimes use redemption or justification or propitiation. I don't use these words in my everyday speech. And so when I see a word, it's not something that's familiar with to me. It's helpful then to do a word study. And then the third reason is because it impacts our understanding of God's word. I think of this verse right here in Romans 3:25. It says that God put forth Christ to be a propitiation by his blood to be received by faith. Propitiation is one of those words that we oftentimes read, and because it's not familiar to us, we kind of just burp and move on. But I would submit to you guys that this impacts not only our understanding of God's word, but impacts our understanding of the gospel. And so these words are important. And so as Christians, we should take the time to sit down and study those words to ask ourselves, what does this word mean? And so I know that task can seem overwhelming, especially as we walk through this last week and now this week. But I just wanted to show you a quick tool that I use. It's Blue Letter Bible. I don't know if you're familiar with this website, but it's blueletterbible.org. And so what you can do is right up here, you can put in the verse and you can change the translation. So I like to read out of the ESV. You can see I already have Romans 3:24 there, and we'll just search. So as we search, it brings up all the verses, and you can see off to the left-hand side something called tools. Now, if you click on tools, let's say we want to do a word study on justified. What does it mean to be justified? So if we click on tools, it brings up this handy little tool here. And what this does is it has the English and it has the Greek. And every Greek word in the New Testament has this number right here. This is called the Strong's number. So when I search this Strong's number, it's going to bring up every case in the New Testament that justified is being used. And it's helpful to do a word study this way because sometimes that Greek word, which you can see right here, dakeo, sometimes that word is not translated justified. It might be translated just, or another way it might be translated. So if you do an English word search, you might miss a few instances that this particular Greek word is used. So it's helpful to search by the Strong's number, which you can easily do by just simply clicking on it. And now it opens up that Greek word. And if you scroll down here, you can see it already gives you kind of the definition or the way that this word is used. So we can see justified is used in the New Testament to render righteous, or such he ought to be, or to wish himself to be considered righteous, or it can also be a declaration or to pronounce one to be just and righteous. And so the question is, as we read Romans 3:24, which one is it? Is somebody wishing himself to be considered righteous? Is he declaring or pronouncing someone to be righteous? And in the text, the subject would be God. So is God declaring or pronouncing us to be righteous? Or is this like somewhat wishful, to render righteous, or such he ought to be? And so one of the ways that can be helpful to kind of help determine what Paul means when he uses the word justification is if we go down, we can see all the times that this word is used by the New Testament writers. So right here we see, yet wisdom is justified by her deeds. We can see right here in Matthew, for by your words you'll be justified, and by your words you'll be condemned. You can see right here, and this is exactly what I mean, this word justification or justified. Here in Luke 7:29, same Greek word, but it's translated just. So if you were to do English search for justification or justified, you might miss this example. And so why is it helpful to walk through these verses? Well, I'll go back to our example. The word bad has changed over time. And so if Jake wrote me a letter, and 20 years later somebody's reading that letter, and in that letter Jake says, you know what, I'm feeling a little bad today. And a reader 20 years later is looking at that and going, what does he mean? Does he mean he feels sick? Does he mean he feels horrible about himself? Or does Jake mean he feels a little edgy? Like being a little rebel today? Like, what does Jake mean? It would be helpful to go back to that letter and scan where he might have used that same word bad and read what context is he using it here. Or maybe he doesn't use that same word bad in that letter, but he's written me other letters. It's helpful to go to Jake's other letters and to scan and to read those letters and see, is Jake using that word bad in other letters? And if so, in what way is Jake using it? And so it's helpful because it gives us insight to how Jake generally, not always, but generally will use the word bad. And so if we go back to the letter that we're reading and where we have some question, it kind of helps us to determine, well, is he meaning bad as in something to be avoided? Or is he meaning bad as something that the world pursues, something that is kind of edgy? And so the same is true for Paul when we're reading his letters, or any New Testament writer for that matter, and we're a little bit confused as to what they mean by a particular word. It's helpful to see how they use that word elsewhere in that book, and maybe not in that book, but elsewhere within the New Testament. And then it's helpful from there on to see how else have the New Testament writers use this particular word. So first, we want to see how does that writer use that word in that book. Secondly, we want to see how does that writer use that word in other books. And then third, we want to see how do other writers use this word in the New Testament. And so this week's word study is faith, which is hugely important. Because like I said, why do we do word studies? We do them because generally the meaning of words change, or there are words that we don't use, or there's words that really impact our study or understanding of God's word. And I would submit to you that the meaning of the word faith has changed over time. Like today, faith is something that is against all reason. It's something that's wishful thinking. It's something that we oftentimes say, well, you just have to have faith when we don't have the answers for it. And I would ask you, is that what the New Testament means by the word faith? Is it something that is against all reason? Is it just wishful thinking? Is it something that is done blindly? Or does the word faith mean something different? And so if there's questions, I would encourage you to go back here to Blue Letter Bible. And again, you can search right up here, Romans 4. And we can search for when he uses faith. His faith is counted as righteous. There we go, Romans 4:5. So click Tools, find the word faith in here. There we go. It's the Greek word pistos. And there's the Strong's number. So click on the Strong's. And it'll give you all the ways that it's used in the New Testament. And then I would encourage you to scroll down even further to look to see how did the New Testament writers use the word faith. Oops, there's my beautiful wife. And how does Paul use the word faith elsewhere in the book of Romans, and in 1 Corinthians, and Galatians, Ephesians, and Philippians, and then go back and look at the ways that it's used in the New Testament, and then read Romans 4:5 again, and pray and make a decision as to how are we to understand what Paul means that we are justified by faith? Are we justified by wishful thinking? Justified by just putting blind faith into something? Or is it a conviction of truth? So I hope that's helpful. I'll be praying for you guys. And if there are any questions, you can reach out to myself or Jake.